Okay, so today our lecture is going to be on problems with fiscal policy. This is a short one. There's 5 problems. Woo! 4 of them are going to be so simple, you're going to be like, cool. The 5th one, you're like, really? Really? But that's okay. I got to address it because I didn't address it last year. Neither did Canyon Crest or Cathedral because we're all operating on we aligned all of our curriculums and we didn't talk about the loanable funds market as much as we should have. And whoop, whoop, there it was on the AP exam. But second semester, when you guys come back for your study guide, I've prepared the most amazing ultimate cheat sheet of AP Econ. Every graph, every shifter, every equation, all into a packet for you. That way you have, I call it the clip notes. So everyone had the notes, but I just didn't talk about it as much as I wanted to. So today we are going to talk about it. But to start this thing out, we got to reinvest our brain into stuff from the beginning of Unit 3. That was 8 academic days ago. Second semester, that was like 3 days ago. So if you are, actually, let me count out to you guys. Remember your number: 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. 2s, put your heads down. 1s, take out your phone. Sam, stop using the mirror as a reflection. You're cheating. Put your head down. Put your head in the bush. Put your head in the bookshelf. 1, 2, 3. 1s, take a photo of. Oh. Take a 1s, take a photo of that. Oh my God, you saying I have a big head? Sam! Okay, 1s. How did you not take a photo of that in time? It was the directions on how to play the game, but we've played it before. It was the game is for second semester. The game is name that concept. You have to name the concept without saying the word. The concept the first time was bagels, and I would say it's the same example Mr. Owen uses for every freaking thing. It can also be an everything or a blueberry, and you put cream cheese on it. And somebody's like, "Oh my God, it's a bagel! He's so uncreative." And yes, the answer is bagel. 1s, put your heads down. 2s, pick your heads up. 2s, get your phones out. Yours is already out. Don't worry about. Oh, heads down. And ready? Take a photo of that. Okay. Partner up. If you're a 1, find a 2. Preferably someone on the other side of the classroom. Find a new person to work with. Find a new person. Andrea, stop judging me. Find a new person. Don't flip anyone off, Bridget. Oh, shoot, that was on tape. Okay, are we ready for deja vu? A transfer payment. A transfer payment is when you have money going from one person to another person, not something accounted for in GDP. A increase during a recession, because if you don't have a job, you're going to increase your transfer payments. You're going to collect unemployment, welfare, or something to give you some income. Discretionary fiscal policy. This is anything that's passed by Congress, a law or an act that will help fix a recessionary or fiscal policy, increasing or decreasing government expenditures, or increasing and decreasing taxes. Expansionary means to grow. In the case of fiscal policy, and expansionary fiscal policy is to increase government spending or cut taxes. Marginal propensity to consume is when you receive new income, how much of it do you spend? So change in consumption over change in income could be a way to do it. And then interest. What is interest? Wow, that's awesome. You took that from a very positive point of view. Thank you. So you're looking at it as someone who invested their money or put it into a savings account and you collect it. What about if you're a borrower? Yes, you. Bingo. I like the way you say it. It's like a surcharge or the cost of borrowing money. It is the expense of borrowing money. Okay, let's move on. Progressive income tax. As we make more money, we pay more taxes. The reason we have a progressive income tax, obviously, is to collect revenue, but it's the other form of a non discretionary fiscal policy. That way, our peaks don't go too high. In the last lecture, I definitely stole an idea from a student from period 5 where I called automatic stabilizers mood stabilizers for our bipolar economy. So, thank you. Non-discretionary fiscal policy, that's exactly what this is, an automatic stabilizer, something to calm the troughs and calm the peaks. A contractionary fiscal policy, a decrease in government spending, increase in taxes, or you could have said shrink would have answered that question. MPS is how much we save when we get new income. So your increased savings over increase in income. And then finally, your multiplier. The multiplier is our what happens, the chain of events that recurs after an initial change in spending. Woo! Okay, okay. So now let's get to those problems. So 5 problems of fiscal policy. Step 1, deficit spending. Deficit spending. Let's imagine in a perfect world, we have, oh, so what is a deficit? What is a deficit? It's when the government spends more than it brings in. Let's say every year the government is spending $500 billion in government spending. That's for our roads, our fire, our policemen, our teachers, anything. We are spending expenditures are $500 billion, and we're bringing in $500 billion in taxes. So our revenue, what's going in to the government is 500. Our expenditures are 500. We'd say our budget is balanced right now. Well, if we have a recessionary gap in our economy and we need to get to our QY, but we're at QE, we have to do an expansionary fiscal policy, right? We got to increase government spending or cut taxes. If I increase government spending to $600 billion to bring us to aggregate demand 1, am I spending more than I'm bringing in? Yes, I am deficit spending. So when the government expenditures exceed its revenue. But you're like, oh, but Mr. Owen, you can solve that problem. Just keep spending where it's at and just cut taxes. That's another way that you could increase aggregate demand. So decrease taxes to 400 billion. Now you're not deficit spending. What row? If you're bringing in 400 and spending 500, are you deficit spending? You're still deficit spending. And if you do a combo of the two, you're even still deficit spending. So anytime our government tries to move aggregate demand up or to the right to increase our equilibrium to our potential, we are deficit spending. If you collect all of our deficits over time, we'll call that a national debt. So any increasing of government spending without increasing taxes in equal amount will result in an increase in our deficit and an increase in our national debt. And for the sake, yeah, what did I say? Oh, yeah, thank you. Originally, it was like that last PowerPoint I had where I had way too many words on it. And I was trying to narrow it down, but then I didn't narrow it down enough. Thank you for correcting that. On the AP exam, they're going to want you to make the assumption that any expansionary fiscal policy will result in deficit spending. And then deficit spending is going to result in something else. And we'll get to that in a second. So most economists agree that budget deficits are necessary because if we didn't go into deficits, Congress would have no way to stimulate the economy if we're in a recession. So we go, okay, it's all right that we have a deficit. You just don't want your deficit to get out of control. Would you guys like to see something that's out of control? The debt calculator, yeah. It sure is, my friend. Are you guys ready to have anxiety? Boom. Let me. All right. So This is our U.S. debtclock.org. Oh my goodness. There's our national debt going up right now, $21 trillion. So um, this is showing what we're bringing in, our federal tax revenue. This is our our federal spending. So we're spending above what we're bringing in taxes right now. Another interesting thing to look at is budget deficits over time. In 1980, 1.18, 187 stands for murder if it's a police radio code. That's kind of crazy. 1990, 2.9. 2000s were looking pretty good. What happened in 2008? Market crashed, right? We had expansionary fiscal policy going on. We were doing some serious deficit spending in 2010. Now we're at about 4%. So it's improving. What did I say? Did I say something wrong? Or are you just making fun of my life? Oh, heck no. I don't want to see this more often than I have to. Yeah, get the app right now. That we owe other countries $21 trillion. Most of our debt is owned by China, Middle East, Japan, people that are investing in us. So we owe that money that future generations will have to pay back. Okay, second problem of fiscal policy, timing. Because fiscal policy has to do with government, right? So first you have what's called the recognition lag. Nowadays, our recognition lag or identifying that we're in a recession or an inflationary gap much faster because we have computers. Yes, deficit spending is a necessary evil because without it, we wouldn't be able to do expansionary fiscal policy. So you can just leave it as a necessary evil. Recognition lag. Congress must realize, hey, oh, we're in a recession, or what role? We're in an inflationary period. Nowadays, we have computers. We file everything digitally. Our IRS tax returns go usually online. I go to H&R Block. Everything happens real fast. We can check real quick. In olden days, when the Bureau of Labor and Statistics went around to collect this data, it would take a lot longer. But still, to recognize that you're in an economic situation, or good or bad, can take time. Then there's this administrative lag where Congress has to pass legislation. I'm on tape. So let's use a hypothetical situation. Let's say Congress realizes we're in a recessionary gap. They're like, oh, we need to increase government spending. What do we do? Let's widen the freeway at Loma Santa Fe because traffic sucks. And someone's like, well, that's great. I would vote on that, but how does that benefit my state? And I'd be like, shut up, Arizona. You suck. I don't want to spend money in your state. And they're like, well, come on. And then finally, there's an operational lag. It takes a while to put this into practice. I've been using the example of the tram at UCSD. I love it because I'm obsessed with it. But those dudes, the spending, the workers' wages, they don't get paid all up front, right? You get a contract. It's going to take probably 2 or 3 years to build that thing. Those workers are getting their increasing salaries every 2 weeks or every month. I don't know how often they get paid, but that government spending has to take time to get to them. When the government buys a whole bunch of concrete for all of those structures, they don't buy it all at once and leave it by the side of the freeway. They buy it as they need it, right? So if they needed to spend $100 billion, it's going to take them a couple of years or months to pay it off. Changing taxes is quicker, but even so, your change in taxes are shown in your paycheck. If they cut $100 billion in taxes, that means we all get more disposable income, but you only get it every time you get paid. Teachers get paid once a month. Most jobs get paid every other week, so twice a month. Some people get paid by contract. You complete a job. If you're an engineer, you get paid. So it takes time for these things to happen. Then there's politically motivated policies. Boy, I'm on tape right now, so I'm going to stick right to the script. Politicians may use economically inappropriate policies to get reelected. That's all I can say now. The example, that's a fictitious one and I kind of make sure all my stuff is very fictitious these days. The example would be a senator promises more welfare and public works programs when there's already a recessionary gap. So increasing government spending in a time of a recessionary gap because you want to get reelected. So I'll go to another fictitious example and say that we're in an inflationary gap. Hey, Mr. Owen is here. Mr. Owen wants to correct the economy for everybody. I'm running for the San Diego district of our Congress. I want to increase our taxes. I want to cut spending in San Diego. I want to calm down that inflation by eating up your disposable income. Vote Owen. Vote yesterday, because yesterday was a voting day. I support this message. Is anyone ever going to vote for me if I want to fix an inflationary gap by increasing your taxes and cutting spending? No. No matter what, even if we need taxes, nobody likes paying taxes because it takes away from our money. I'm not saying that you can buy happiness. You can buy a penguin, and no one is unhappy with a penguin. I had to repeat that one because it was so good that I want that on the lecture. Then we have our net export effect. Our net export effect, and we are definitely going to finish this on time. Our net export effect. So, international trade reduces the effectiveness of fiscal policy. If we remember our law of aggregate demand, or our downward shaping thing, a shape of aggregate demand is because as price levels go up, countries don't want to buy our stuff. Let's imagine you're Canada and you take a look at two economies, Mexico and the United States. Now, originally we were both at the same spot in our price levels, but then America went into a recession and we're over here at this price level in our recessionary gap. If I'm Canada, I'd want to buy the goods from the cheaper nation, America, right? But our Congress wants to fix this recessionary gap. So if they fix this recessionary gap, they increase our aggregate demand. If you increase our aggregate demand from AD to AD1, it's going to draw up the price level in the United States. And now our goods are more expensive than Mexico. Therefore, what's going to happen to our net exports? They're going to go down. Because if you're Canada, you want to buy your goods from the cheaper place. If we make a fiscal policy that raises our price level, then Canada is going to go, no. I'm not going to buy my avocados from California anymore. I'm going to buy my avocados from Mexico. So if we increase our aggregate demand, shift it to the right, it draws up our price level. Our exports go down. If our exports go down, our net exports do that, and we'd actually be working our way back somewhere around here. Cool. So to get the last couple words on there, U.S. goods are now more expensive. Don't worry about the U.S. dollar. Just leave it at that. We have a whole unit to talk about depreciating dollars. And foreign countries buy less. Our exports fall. Our net exports decrease. Aggregate demand shifts to the left. So while we thought we were doing something awesome, like moving our aggregate demand to the right, it'll actually move us back here. All right, here comes the tough one. Here comes the tough one. It's actually not that bad. It's not that bad. It's going to be a little snippet to a new graph we learn about in next semester. Number 5, the crowding out effect. The crowding out effect will be at least 3 or 4 problems on every AP exam. They come at it from a variety of different ways. The crowding out effect comes from when government spending has an unintended side effect. And so I came up with 2 examples. First, a simple example. We're in a recessionary gap. And this is a stretch. Just roll with the fact that this is a simple example. We're in a recessionary gap. And the government's like, okay, we're going to increase spending to get out of this zone. We're going to build a library. It's actually a really nice thing to do. The government decides we are going to build ourselves a library. And they increase our aggregate demand. In fact, they build libraries all across the country because that was their choice. Well, that's great. They moved us here. What's the unintended side effect of having a library? Maybe traffic. There it is. Bookstores close, right? Now consumers aren't going to buy books. There's a bajillion different libraries everywhere. So consumer spending would fall, right? Aggregate demand would actually fall back down, an unintended side effect. They increase aggregate demand by making libraries, but inadvertently, they affected consumer spending because now nobody is going to buy books. They're going to go to the library. Real example. I got you. Real example, same situation. We're in a recessionary gap. Government decides we're going to increase spending. Well, when you increase spending, sorry, what was the number one problem with fiscal policy? Deficit spending. We're spending money we don't have, right? If we spend money we don't have, where do we get it? We have to borrow it, right? When you borrow money, do you ever just get it for free? Like, yo, Raymond, I need to borrow $100 billion. Can you kick down for a homie for about 10 years? No, you're going to charge me something, right? Interest. So when the government borrows money, they are going to be charged interest. This is going to increase the price of money because government is going to go to the private sector and start borrowing money. I want to buy war bonds or Liberty bonds or any one of those other bonds you studied back in World War II in APUS. They're going to increase the price of money. So when the government buys bonds, that increases the interest rate. When you increase the interest rate, investment is going to fall. Investment for both businesses and consumers. So check it out. Remember, and I'm going to show it to you on this graph and then one more graph. We're going to have time. This is going to work. So if our price level is here and our demand goes to the right to 81, price levels go up. If price levels are going up, banks have to charge higher interest to keep up with the increasing inflation that comes with our increasing price levels, right? So if interest goes up, do you want to buy a new car? No. Do you, if you are a businessman, do you want to buy a new bagel toaster? No. So if the government deficit spends, that's cool. You are spending government money, right? You're increasing government expenditures. Stay with me, guys. You are increasing government expenditures, but if you raise the interest rates, you're going to cut consumer spending and investment spending. Because when interest rates are high, I don't want to borrow money. So they say that the government crowds out the consumers or the investors. Now, where does this come from? It comes from a graph called the loanable funds market. And I see that I am still within 5 minutes. So I'm going to preview this as 10 seconds. Not happening. All right, so the government crowds out consumers and or investors. I will continue this next class. My bad. Oh, the shout out. Okay, so last class where we left off, we were talking about the 5 problems with fiscal policy, and I think we just had enough before we got to loanable funds. The 5th problem was called the crowding out effect, and that's when government spending might cause an unintended effect that weakens their policy. And what that means is if we are deficits, poor little fella. I know, it's always sad. So the problem, oh, that's a freshie. So we're in a recessionary gap. Fiscal policy that we're really going to be looking at, and the biggest problem here is deficit spending, which is our problem 1 with problems with fiscal policy. And in deficit spending, that occurs when we're trying to get out of a recessionary gap. So if we're trying to move our aggregate demand over here, we have those 2 options of increasing government spending, and at the same time, we can cut taxes, but both types, both increasing spending and decreasing taxes both lead to deficit spending. And so while the goal is to move that way, there's an unintended side effect that weakens it or brings aggregate demand up, but then counters back. And I gave you guys an example last class that let's say we're in this problem. We're in AD, we're in a recessionary gap. Our QE, our current equilibrium, is less than our QY. We want to get aggregate demand to grow. So like, oh, well, good idea. Why don't we build a whole bunch of libraries? And the whole bunch of libraries are built. Government spends a lot of money on it. Our economy has a high MPC, so our multiplier is really large. Spending goes through the economy, and we're back. Woo! But unfortunately, because of all the libraries, there's an unintended side effect in that consumer spending falls in book category. Why? Because nobody needs to buy books anymore. And so consumer spending falls, and we come back to here to aggregate demand too, and we're still in a recessionary gap, just a little bit smaller one. That was a simple example I gave. The real example for crowding out effect comes from if the government spending increases and taxes remain the same, or if taxes decrease and spending stays the same, or it's a combo of both, we have to borrow money. We have to deficit spend. Aggregate demand goes up. But because of that deficit spending, it increases the price for money because federal government, when they deficit spend, they got to get the money from somewhere. So they have to borrow it. They have to borrow it from private institutions. And when you borrow money, the demand for loanable funds grows. And we're going to look at a graph in the next slide that shows that as the demand for loanable funds grows, all of a sudden interest goes up. And if interest goes up, investment spending is going to go down because no one's going to want to invest in their business when interest rates are high, and consumer spending is going to go down. You're not going to want to buy a home that has an interest rate on your repayment, or a car that has a lease with an interest rate repayment. And you may even decide, I don't want to go to college if my college tuition percent interest rate is like 10%. You're like, nah, I think I'll wait. So same thing happens here. There was a problem, government solved it, but by deficit spending, they cut into investment spending and consumer spending, and aggregate demand shifted back to the left. Does that summarize where we were the last class? Cool. Everyone's cool with this. Okay, this definitely affects investment spending and consumer spending. So where does this all come from? It comes from a market called the loanable funds market. Last year, I only focused in on loanable funds in relation to this unit, and I probably should have gone both this unit and the next unit into unit 4, but we're still going to break this one up. Half of loanable funds market we'll study in unit 3 when it pertains to fiscal policy. Then the other half of loanable funds market we'll get to next unit when we're talking about money and what is money and monetary policy. So starting out with a question, is real interest rate of 50% good or bad? Bad? Okay. Is it good to anybody? Yeah, it depends who you are, right? If you're a bank and or let's say you're going to loan a friend $1,000 and charge them 50% interest, is that good for you? Heck yeah. It's good for you. It's bad for your friend, right? So 50% interest rate is great for lenders, but bad for borrowers. So just like a supply and demand graph, we're going to have a loanable funds market that looks at an equilibrium price where consumers or borrowers are willing to borrow at a certain interest rate and suppliers are willing to supply funds at a certain interest rate. So this market shows the effect on real interest rates, not nominal interest rates. Just like every other demand curve we've seen up to this point, demand is going to be an inverse relationship between real interest rate and the quantity of loans demanded, because the people that demand loans are going to be consumers and businesses. When interest rates are really high, consumers don't want them. I don't want to repay a loan with really high interest rates. If I'm a business, I don't want to invest at a really high interest rate. But when interest rates are low, they're very happy, and so are they. The flip side will be supply. If you're a bank and interest rates are really high, and thank you for helping me out on that one, and when interest rates are really high and you're a bank, you're like, yeah, I am totally willing to make a ton of loans at 50%. Let's see what sucker out there will take that. Poor fella. So with supply, we have a direct relationship between real interest rates and the quantity of loans supplied. There it goes. This morning it was hot air coming out of the air conditioner. It was brutal. For the sake of your notes for next semester, for next unit, please just write this. This is not the same as the money market. Supply isn't vertical. I know it makes no sense to us right now because we haven't talked about the money market graph yet, but when you're reviewing your notes for your final, you don't want to come across the loanable funds market and mistake it with the money market. Two are different, but they sound very similar. So I would just put a big star by this. That way, if you have the organization system I did in high school, my backpack, the back of my car, anywhere else I crammed paper, I came across it, I wouldn't want to mistake the two. So this is not the same as the money market. Okay. Oh, they're still writing, sorry. My allergies too. Oh, the Santa Anas, for me, disaster. Yeah. Okay, so here's what this bad boy looks like. We have real interest rates on our y-axis, and we have quantity of loans on our x-axis. If I'm a borrower and interest rates are really high, let's say like 10%, the quantity of loans, maybe there's only $1,000 worth of loans that are available out there at 10%. That's a really small number. But let's say if interest rates were super low, like 0.05%. Wow, that's amazing. Everybody is going to want to take out a loan. You're just repaying money back that's almost money. Loans are super low. The quantity would be super high. Bless you. But if you're a supplier, it's the opposite. If you want to make a profit and interest rates are high, you're going to supply as much as you can. You want to make as much profit as you can. But if interest rates are low, why bother? I'm not going to see the profit in it. So if interest rates are high and you're a borrower, you're like, yeah, it's cool. I don't want to borrow. I don't want to pay it back with a really high interest rate. If interest rate is high and you're a lender, you're like, yeah, this is the time to start making some loans because I'm going to get paid back with a high interest rate. Yes, sir. Okay, so where we have our intersection is what we will call our equilibrium, and that's what the interest rate is at. And just like any other curve, there's going to be some shifters, but we don't spend a lot of time with loanable funds market for AP Econ or in Econ 100, like the macro course. So what we'll say is there's going to be some shifters. The only two we care about is deficit spending and surplus spending. So if government decides that they're going to deficit spend, that means at any point they're going to shift the curve because government can't make the decision to say, nah, I'm going to sit this one out. The interest rates are too high. Why? Because, I mean, if there's a hurricane, a tsunami, an earthquake, the government needs to act. They need to pay something. If there's a recession, the government needs to act. They need to participate. They're not going to be like, yeah, we're in a recession. I think I'm going to wait till it gets worse and the interest rates fall lower. Then I might act. They don't have a choice. They're going to jump into the economy. So our demand curve would shift to the right. So for the sake of this unit, all we really care about is if there's deficit spending, demand shifts to the right. If we're surplus, we're shifting to the left. Demand would shift to the right for deficit. And if we have a surplus in our budget, we'd be shifting to the left. That will never happen. But it's nice to think that it could. So deficit spending goes to the right. What does that mean? That means just like any other demand shift to the right, interest rates are going to go up and the quantity of loans, go down. Go up. The box that fell was down below my foot. So interest rates go up, quantity goes up. Yeah, you like that? That's what I was thinking in my head when that happened. Or maybe I'm just lying to you so I don't look stupid on tape. Interest rates go up, quantity goes up. That's all we care about. When interest rates go up, consumer spending drops, investment spending drops, aggregate demand made that awesome AD shift originally, but crowding out effect will bring it back down this way. So it doesn't have the full intended effect. So I have these written out as far as demand shifters for you guys, but I put the two that we care about that are going to show up for us in red, and that is budget deficit or a budget surplus. And why would it work for a surplus? Why would it shift it to the left? Because if the government's not borrowing money, there's more money or there's more loanable funds out there available, and so it would shift it to the left. So these are the only two that are going to show up. And the tests love to always talk about crowding out. Whenever they say crowding out, we know crowding out occurs with expansionary fiscal policy. It's because interest rates are going up. So aggregate demand shifting to the right is expansionary fiscal policy. Anytime there's expansionary fiscal policy, there is deficit spending. Deficit spending leads to crowding out because there's a deficit. C goes down, I goes down, and they find every possible combination of trying to link expansion, deficit, crowding out, consumer investment going down. Cool. So let's look at 3 multiple choice questions real quick, and then we'll hit an FRQ, and we'll call it a day. Don't worry about the supply side shifters. These will save when we get to the monetary monetary policy and our unit on money. And let's tell our neighbor, and then let's hit it with some ASL. Crowding out refers to a decrease in. Tell your neighbor, and then hit some ASL low. I heard that. That's not ASL. What? Oh yeah, ASL again. I'm gonna put them up there. I think that'd be kind of fun. A, B, C, D. Keep it low. Oh, E, like a cat scratch. A, B, C, D. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Crowding out refers to a decrease in private investment due to increase in borrowing by the government. Sound good? All right. Let's do another one. When an economy is at full employment, which of the following will most likely create demand pull inflation in the short run? Demand pull inflation. Tough one. Demand pull inflation occurs when people have more money and they're buying more stuff and there's a scarce amount of resources out there. Which one is going to lead to more disposable income and purchasing of more things, driving up the price? A, B, C, D, or E? You got a gesture for me? What's that? D is like this. It's not directly related to what we're talking about, but you'll see the connection here. All right, 1, 2, 3. Right? If we have a smaller interest rate, people are going to be borrowing money to go get the things they want. Mr. Owens always wanted a Ferrari. If interest rates are low, it might be my chance. I'm never going to get a Ferrari. I understand that, and I accept who I am. C, real interest rates. Interest rates are low. People are going to be borrowing more money, and then they're going to be buying more things because we demand. When you demand, you pull it. I demand. All right, one more. Suppose the national government increases deficit spending on goods and services, increasing the demand for loanable funds. In the long run, this policy would most likely result in which of the following changes in the country? A, B, C, D, or E? 1, 2, 3. Who does that? Who picks C 3 times in a row? That's the thing on a test that would just bother my brain, right? Real interest rate would have to go up. Real interest rate would have to go up because we're deficit spending. And if real interest rate goes up, that means we're decreasing our investment. Cool. Okay, so All right, so let's go through this bad boy. Assume the United States economy is currently in a long run equilibrium. Awesome. If we're currently on our long run equilibrium, that means our QE equals our QY. So if I'm going to make my graph, because part A says draw a correctly labeled graph of aggregate demand, aggregate supply, showing each of the following. So to have all my points, I need to have price level, real, GDP, long run aggregate supply, aggregate demand, aggregate supply. I need to have my equilibrium at PLE. And what do they want me to label that one? They wanted me to label that YE. So full employment there. So I guess if we wanted to fix that, YE. Assume the government increases spending on national defense without raising taxes. So as far as we go right now, we don't really need this, but you know where they're going with that, deficit spending, right? So assume the government increases spending on national defense. So increasing government spending does what to aggregate demand? Shifts it to the right. So aggregate demand shifts to the right, which gives us, they want us to label, sorry, I have a glare going on right now. I guess they didn't ask us to label it. I'm going to do it anyway. On your graph, show how the government action affects aggregate demand. So we would be showing that by doing that one right there. So we're good. Check. How will this government action affect unemployment rate in the short run? Well, we can see that we've gone beyond our full employment output. So one way to accomplish that is to increase employment. So we can say that. We could also state that in this case, if we have our Phillips curve and inflation, we know we started at this point right here, and now we've moved to this point. But how would I say it? I would say unemployment decreased in the short run because more workers were needed as we expanded beyond our full employment. So that's how I would explain that. Part C says, assume the economy adjusts to a long-run equilibrium after an increase in government spending. Whenever we look at long run we handle by analyzing our price levels. We know that price level went up, so if price level goes up, then aggregate supply is going to shift. This all comes back to the idea that in the short run, wages and resource prices are sticky. My wage is stuck until I renegotiate my contract. But in the long run, wages and resource prices are fully movable. So in the long run, I'm going to ask for a raise. If I ask for a raise, how does that affect aggregate supply? Shifts it to the left, right? Because aggregate supply is resource prices, actions by government, and productivity. I'm a resource. I'm a laborer. I'm asking for a raise. I have become more expensive. Cost of production decrease, and businesses are less likely to produce as much. So aggregate supply one would shift, and that would lead us to PL2. So on this one, how will short-run aggregate supply curve in the long run compare with the initial long-run equilibrium? Explain. I would say it is now at the same level of output. We've returned to the long-run output, but our price levels are higher. Sound good? Why? Because in the long run, resource prices are flexible. So we shifted our aggregate supply to the left. So that knocks off that one. This one says on your graph, label the new long run equilibrium price of PL2. We've addressed that right there. In order to finance an increase in government spending on national debt from Part B, because they increased national defense without raising taxes, the government borrows funds from the public Using a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market, show the effect of the government's borrowing on real interest rates. So they just want us to draw that loanable funds market that we looked at today. So real interest rates, quantity of loanable funds, supply of loanable funds, demand of loanable funds. We initially had equilibriums, but they're not telling us what to draw them out as. So I would just say D loanable funds 1. So this was our real interest rate equilibrium. This would be a real interest rate 1. Down here we have quantity at equilibrium and quantity of 1. So increase and an increase. Given the change in, so are we cool with that? We just shifted our demand curve. Given the change in real interest rate in part D, what is the impact on each of the following? If we have an increase in our interest rate, what's going to happen to investment? Decrease, right? And then, here we go, let's bring it all home. Given the change in real interest rate in part D, what is the impact of the following on economic growth rate? If we decrease our investment, what's going to happen to our rate of growth? It's going to decrease, right? Or it's going to slow down. So we know that if we are investing in capital stock, that's going to shift our PPC curve, right? Which also means it would be shifting our long run aggregate supply. So if we're decreasing our investment, all of a sudden we're not going to be as productive in the future. So decreased investment leads to slowing economic growth rate because we are not investing and we are not becoming more productive in the long run. Dude, you guys just rocked an FRQ and we still have half a semester to go. So this is why I was really wanting to encourage you guys to take that AP test, because I mean, you guys finish that real quick. This would be the long one. Then there's 2 short ones that go with it, and then we're done. This would be a very manageable AP test to take. So nice job. Let me pause.